Welcome to LeCorner, La Source's digital show dedicated to the sport and entertainment industry. Every 2 weeks, we invite a professional to share their experience, background, and challenges. The sport industry moves fast, and having their insights is the best way to keep up to speed. Welcome to LeCorner.
Launched in 2012, IMG Arena has recently accelerated its transformational strategy, bringing together all the fundamental tech pieces required in the sports business. We were happy to receive Mark Wrigley, Senior Director of Rights, and Andrew Corser, Vice President of Sales at IMG Arena. We had a great time learning about IMG Arena's services and how they work with their clients on long-term strategies, as in the examples of the recently signed MLS or European League deals. I hope this episode helps you crack the IMG Arena code. See you soon. Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of LeCorner International. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Mark and Andrew from IMG Arena. Hi, gents.
Hi there.
Hi, good to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you on this episode. Plenty of nice stuff happening these days around IMG Arena. A lot of mysteries to go through throughout this podcast, but definitely a lot of ambition, and excited to have this podcast with you guys. So to get right into it, could you guys give us a quick introductions, maybe starting with you, Andrew?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Andrew. I head up sort of our entire sales and commercial operation here. So I'm covering all of our sales to bookmakers across all of our content and services, and then also what we're doing in the media landscape, or starting to develop in the media landscape. Perhaps one of the mysteries that you want to reference there. I've been at IMG for 8 years now, so I've certainly seen the growth from us being sort of a fledgling little unit within IMG to what it is now, with built out in its entirety as IMG Arena.
Yeah, it's definitely this growth and this extension of scope that I want to go through during this podcast to have a perfect understanding and help with everybody's understanding of it. Mark, can you go for your little introduction?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I also joined very similar time to Andrew over 8 years ago. So seeing the growth of IMG Arena to what it is today has been amazing. But my role within IMG Arena is working with our rights holder clients, federations, tournaments, leagues in acquiring their rights and managing them through their life cycle with us. So working across all different sports in all different territories around the world as well.
Yeah, and lots there to cover. And just because it's also good to understand a little bit the background of our guests, Andrew, so you come from a non-sports environment. You were originally at AXA and Informa. What made you do the big jump to the sports environment?
I mean, it's probably wrong to say. I was at AXA, was a sort of a kind of a bit of a sort of a year in industry during my time at university, just trying to establish what I wanted to do, where I wanted to go. Post university, my only idea on where I wanted to go in my career was sales. And then if I was to give you a one-word answer, I wanted to work in sport. I mean, I think there's a huge chunk of the population that would probably would love to work in sport, right? It's everyone's pastime. It's not everyone's pastime, but it's a high majority of people's sort of life outside of work. So being able to sort of combine the two is massive, right? The only real sports company I knew of at the time really was that I sort of wanted to go in, apart from the likes of Sky Sports or broadcasters in the UK, was IMG. I'm a golf fan. I knew of IMG. I knew of sort of the Mark McCormack story. So for me, it was just, I saw an opportunity that popped up, went for it. If I'm really honest, I didn't really know what it entailed. I felt I perhaps blagged my way through the interview and somehow landed in the seat of getting here. Like purely with the idea, actually my original idea was I'll do a couple of years in this role, then I'll try and transfer into something to do with golf internally. And I think as with many people's careers in IMG, They get in, the transfer to the department they originally wanted to happen just doesn't end up happening because they get so engrossed in the work they're doing and so just sort of knuckle down and involved that you never move. But look, I think perhaps just saying I wanted to be in sport, that's the vision. But like when you actually think about it and say, why do you want to be in sport? Well, it's the one thing that everyone talks about, right? It's the one, it's the very easy connector. And if I was to say from a sales position, right, you've got the easiest intro of all time when you're going and selling stuff to customers, or you're trying to create kind of partnerships and relationships, because everyone seems to start on a level ground of having a conversation about, I don't know, the soccer matches or football matches that happened over the weekend, or what's the cricket score if you're in the UK, or did you see what happened over the weekend in this particular league? So like it's just that, it's the connector really, isn't it? Right? It's been able to sort of link all the things together.
Yeah, it's a funny one. So sales first and foremost, and then obviously orientation towards sport. It's a funny one. It's really one where it feels like students don't necessarily think about working for IMG to begin with, but more want to work in clubs and end up working with an IMG type organization because it's actually somehow more exciting and more dynamic on this side of the scope than on the club potential league side of things. Interesting one, and also excited to discuss a little bit further the whole IMG McCormack, because I read the book. I don't know if you guys read it too, of What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business School, which I thought was super inspiring. But I'm just as inspired and excited about the new vision that you guys have in terms of not only doing sales, but delivering something that's a bit more modern in the ways of approaching your services and what you want to cover with the different organizations based on the growth and the dynamic around IMG Arena, obviously. But super interesting. And you, so on your end, Mark, you were on the Sport Radar side of things, which is definitely very sports centric and very close to your business now. Tell us what made you do the jump between those two organizations.
Yeah, for sure. Similar to Andy, I always wanted to work in sport. I did two sports degrees as well at university. So my first step was at Sport Radar. Always obsessed with numbers and business and the sports side of things. So worked there for a few years. It was enjoyable as a startup. The opportunity came at IMG to join this really new business, and at the time there was 4 people working in the division. So to kind of really put a mark down and kind of be involved from the ground up was really, really exciting in this startup environment, but also backed by IMG, and we all knew and had heard about IMG and what they were involved in and all the different aspects of sport. And I think that was the real key driver here was being in that startup environment, but also having that support of a much bigger business. And it was really exciting and still is really exciting to be part of. This still feels like a startup, and it still feels so heavily involved in sport as well. So that was kind of my key driver to move across.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I was about to ask you, how exciting is the transition between systemic growth, where you just go after everything, versus now bigger team, probably more processes, right? Because given the land that you guys are covering, I'm assuming that IMG Arena is now a big beast, right?
Yeah, I think over the last 2 years, particularly even during the pandemic, we had huge amount of growth, and to kind of evolve the business on from being that really fast paced, just everyone doing everything and having to kind of knuckle down and do it, to actually putting in more rigorous process to really support the growth of the business, because it needed those extra foundations to kind of keep driving these really cool, innovative products that we're looking at and have obviously developed over the last couple of years. But the growth side of things is a bit amazing, and I think at last count we're close to 500 people. So, coming from the days when me and Andy joined when we were 5 and 6, it's amazing. It's
a different beast. Yeah. Definitely a different beast. And so maybe like to take a step back. So everybody in the sports environment knows IMG. Andrew, can you help us narrow down a little bit? What is IMG Arena? What is the scope of IMG Arena? Because you guys are in multiple conversations on the betting, on the OTT, working with clubs, working with leagues. What is the scope, and how would you synthesize a presentation of IMG Arena?
Yeah, I mean, look, if we were to look at it, right, we'd focus on probably what's the core of our business, right? And the core of our business, and probably aligned to many these days, right, is data. So we're a data-driven business. We're a business that takes data from sports, leagues, federations, clubs, players, and we utilize that data. So we turn that data into sort of actionable insights, content. We marry it up with other content sources such as live streaming, to very much create a very fan engaged experience. And also we're looking to enhance and develop on those fan engagement experiences, right? So when we take that data, we deploy that across sports betting, media, and pro services. So the sports betting piece is probably relatively self-explanatory. There's been an enormous boom, and this has predominantly been our focus for sort of the first 4 to 5 years of the life cycle of this business, right? It was capitalizing and developing the need for bookmakers to obviously have data as quickly as they possibly could, and also become a very central kind of source of information for what's happening in the sports betting industry. Now, to a certain extent, for us, that evolved what we're doing on the media and the pro side, right? So if you can tackle the problems of speed, consistency, reliability, and you can have them married up, which is exactly what the betting industry required, you sort of immediately have yourself a product that can deploy back into media, right? You can immediately have yourself a product that goes back into sports pro as well. So we're very much kind of focusing on those three kind of real key segments for us now. So betting, media, and sports pro. So all of these areas, all of these elements, what we're trying to do is tackle lots of I'd say lots of questions. Like we're obviously not the only player in this industry, right? And there is a huge amount of innovation. Actually, if we went back to what Mark's point was, like we've still got that startup feel. We've still got that startup feel because there's an immense amount of change that's happening in the industry as a whole across this data segment, right? It's a very, very data rich segment. So for us, it's about really fostering that that kind of entrepreneurial kind of based approach where we're getting teams internally to make sure that when they're developing products, they're looking at, okay, what's the use cases here? What's the use case for betting? What's the use case for media? What's the use case for pro in terms of looking back at how we can collect a deeper level of data, provide that back to clubs, players, federation, tours, whomever it might be, to help them inform performance. And the whole thing links back, obviously, into the ecosystem, right? Because if there's a more advanced position from players, they're performing better. That might create new opportunities from a media perspective, or even a betting perspective in terms of betting opportunities. So we very much view this as a kind of circular sort of industry with data at the core. And look, when we present it internally, we literally do break it down in a visualization so that like data and content is at the core for us, and then from there it builds out, and there's very sort of intricate linked use cases across the board.
Yeah, that makes sense. Would it be fair to say that because to some extent data capture on site at high speed is probably the toughest job, right? Like in terms of delivering your clients. And so from the moment you capture the data point on site to the moment you deliver on the end platform of the customer is probably the hardest and most essential journey. Would it be fair to say that because you nailed that workflow, you then started from there building all the additional services around those data points? Because one, you had to advise on how to capitalize on those data points more extensively, and then somehow the other services around them were just natural evolutions of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you tackle the latency, if you tackle the delivery, and if you're using the correct sort of technology, I mean, like technology is playing a huge part in our business now. Obviously, when we went back to sort of let's call it ground zero, where myself and Mark were, yes, there was technology, and we thought we had the best technology in terms of collecting the data from the umpire's chair and passing that through to bookmakers, right? But actually, when we sit back and look at that level of technology and that level of delivery that we had back then, it was simple. It's simplistic. You're working within a confined environment. You're working in a place that is consistent, and there's only a few actions that you'll need to capture. We're moving into golf, which was obviously a huge project of ours. You're on a golf course, 18 holes, variable weather conditions, variable connection conditions. Like there's no hard wire, right? We actually ended up sort of over engineering it, so we had 4 different ways in which we would receive the data, just to make sure that we had 4 levels of redundancy. And essentially all these pieces of technology were kind of tasked with getting the result there as quickly as possible, with a bit of information there as quickly as possible. So yeah, you're absolutely right. If you can tackle that and you can have the reliable source of data, then actually your products become easier, right? Because what no one wants to see from a fan perspective is feeds going. I mean, if we look at people that were sort of competitors and people that we work with in the industry, when feeds go down or streaming feeds go down, the backlash you get or the experience that you get is not pleasant, right? So making sure that you can consistently provide the uptime and the information that people want and people can have at their fingertips right now is definitely the most important thing, and where we've been able to sort of really build out the product set that we've got.
Yeah, it is really one of those things. I won't name them for their reputation's sake, but yesterday night, the first Champions League game in my territory was a big mess, and the backlash you get on social media is pretty instantaneous. So, but it's hard to explain to the entire world that OTT workflows are actually complicated and super sophisticated, and sometimes there are glimpses along the way. But that's interesting. And so that's a super wide range of services. So I'm assuming, Mark, when you go and acquire different sets of rights with different types of organizations, you have a super wide range of possibilities and RFPs that you can potentially answer, but it's also narrowing down and understanding on the other side what the actual end client is expecting. So help us understand, who are your biggest clients? Where do you acquire the most rights? Are you working more closely with bookies, clubs, leagues, federations, broadcasters? What does the rights structure look like at an IMG Arena?
Yeah, so I'll talk about just for background, we call our federations and leagues and rights holders clients, and the end users the kind of customer base. So Andy would do more sales to customers, and we would do more services back to the rights holder, to our clients. So from a client perspective, we can work with a lot more, like you said, as our technologies and our services and our products develop. We can respond to more RFPs. We can engage in wider partnerships. So there's a lot more that we can do with the world of sport. So a kind of a last count, and it's probably about over 100 different rights holders that we work with today, predominantly led across the key commercial sports, driven by sports betting, but into wider businesses as well. But led in football and tennis and basketball with leagues like the MLS and the European leagues. And in tennis, we've worked with the ATP since inception back in 2012. Basketball very, very closely with the EuroLeague, obviously a wider partner of IMG as well. But also a number of other tours, World Snooker Tour, we have a very close relationship with, World Table Tennis Tour, where we provide more than just a rights trading service. We provide a hell of a lot of their infrastructure around production, data collection, data creation, tournament services. So there's a lot more that IMG Arena can provide. As 5-6 years ago, we were maybe more perceived as rights traders and sales guys back in terms of the McCormack days, but we are a technology business that can provide all these services. So it's becoming more and more wide ranging to who we can work with and what different parts of that value chain we can operate within in terms of a sports federation.
I think that's just on that point. Like it's a really, I think that there's been a big shift in the market recently, and I know Adam Kelly alluded to it recently in a couple of articles that he's done, and I'm probably of the same opinion. Is that 8 years ago there was sort of varying different operators and companies at the different levels, right, of the ecosystem, and it was about buying the rights and selling them with a margin. And I think what rights holders are looking for, or what we can do for rights holders now is very, very different. We're not just looking to sort of deliver them a fixed number. It's a plan, right? It's through the sports services team that we've got. It's a plan on, okay, how can we help you and resolve some of your data collection pieces? How can we make that data set richer, which then develops a new incremental product on the betting side, which develops a new incremental service for you on media, which then enables you to provide your clubs, teams, players with more information than what they are currently have. And at the heart of this, it was funny because I was having a conversation yesterday looking at our new tennis event centre. That one of the key points that gets raised is kind of the data integrity across the whole ecosystem of the product, right? So if you're looking at a betting perspective, right, these guys aren't now just considering the data that they're getting. They're saying, okay, we want that data to be replicated in everything that gets pushed out on media, everything that gets pushed back to players, and every bit of information that gets recorded in the history of the sport or the history of the match, because they want to make sure that, okay, not talking about integrity from a betting standpoint, but the data integrity, so that there's a single source of truth. And where before the industry was quite perhaps fragmented with different relationships and different partnerships with different entities getting involved in collecting different data sets or selling them to different media sort of outlets, now it's sort of, I think there's a feeling that it's becoming sort of full circle. And the only way you can do that is develop a much deeper partnership with a federation, a rights holder, a bookmaker, a media entity than I hate to call them sort of superficial, but in certain instances, they were just about taking a product and turning a margin on it, right? I don't know if that business model, it has its place still, and there is still definitely content and services that were delivered in that way. But there's a much more top to bottom, or even actually bottom up approach, I guess, in looking at how we collect, deliver, and sort of monetize in partnership with the federations on this stuff.
Yeah, it definitely feels like the sense of the story, right? Where it was a high margin industry, whereas now it's more SaaS model industry where you have to build trust, long-term contracts, and like create value alongside your partners. It's definitely something where you want to have one single point of contact. And at the end of the day, IMG Arena can be that one single source of truth and collaboration, or you guys can also plug in certain of your services with certain of your competitors on other aspects. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the partnership approach that we take to all of our rights holders and our clients. It's the way they expect us to operate, and we want to operate in partnership with them.
Yeah. And so that getting back to my initial question is, who are the biggest clients? Is it still, is IMG Arena still mostly on the booking side, or is it diversifying pretty extensively? What is the truth of IMG Arena's business in September 2022?
I mean, look, it's a tricky one to answer. Like, I mean, obviously, a lot of our the content we provide and the services that we're providing are obviously back to bookmakers, right? So if you're looking at a true sales perspective, then yes, kind of the sort of betting industry is a driver. But if we're actually looking at the partnerships that we've got in place for the next, let's even look at long term, right, for the next 10 years, some of our even sort of slightly below that, let's look at the partnerships we've got between 5 and 10 years over the next side. They're sitting with rights holders, right? And those partnerships, they're the one. They are actually where the value is held for us. So, although not in some instances a direct sort of payment that's coming back to IMG, they're informing and they're developing the sets of products that we're going to be producing across betting, across media, across professional, and they're the underpinning essentially of what we're doing over the next sort of 5 to 10 years. So that's where we're obviously going through this material shift now, right? It's fair to say we are probably behind the curve in terms of technology and what we were doing. We're actually now getting to a place where we're trying to skip and go ahead of the curve. So the stuff in the middle to us, okay, that's being done, but it's how can we actually skip the stuff that's currently being done to go to sort of version V2 of what can be achieved.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. So let's dig into concrete examples, right? One of the big ones is the big deal that you guys signed with European leagues, and maybe that's one for you, Mark. So first of all, and just because in terms of everything that we've been discussing is the perfect example of that long-term contract syndication of interest of different clients in a certain area. So can you help us understand and explain maybe to those of our listeners that don't know about European leagues, what is European leagues, what's the contract, and what's the objective as an IMG Arena with such a collaboration?
Yeah, I mean, European Leagues may not be a well-known brand, but it's a fantastic organization which pulls together a whole host of member leagues throughout Europe. The deal that we have in place with them includes 19 of their member leagues. So to bring them all together into a collective agreement is not the simplest thing, but the organization of the European Leagues is brilliant at working very closely with its members. So they have worked over a couple of years, slowly aggregating and building up their FastPath data rights to push out to the market. Over the last couple of cycles, they've been distributing that non-exclusively to a number of the other suppliers in this space. And we decided that we didn't want to be part of that process, and we wanted to reimagine how a partnership would work with European leagues to add as much value as we possibly could to them. And also to build out this solution for ourselves. So we reimagined this deal alongside the European leagues, where we would be their exclusive official data partner for FastPath betting data. Now, what does that mean? That means we go into stadia and collect live incident feed throughout every game from over 8,500 different matches each year. So a huge amount of content where we've got to get those things that we talked about earlier in terms of latency, accuracy, reliability, that are all incredibly important for the betting industry because of the huge amount of liabilities that go onto these level of matches. So for us, it was building out an ODC network, or official data collector network, as we call it, of individuals who will go and collect all of these matches in real time, relay that back to us. We've built out custom software that collects that, sent out dedicated hardware to ensure that we have all these component points around accuracy, reliability. That comes back into IMG Arena, and we distribute that out to our partners, to our customer base. So it's a complex deal, a huge operational undertaking, but a fantastic partnership that we have with European leagues and its 19 members.
Yeah, definitely. And so one of my questions, but you partially answered it, it's a mix of hardware infrastructure that you install in every stadium, or that is movable?
So it's they're tablet devices that each ODC will have and take to the game. There's a lot of data integrity around how that scorer is accredited and has to have verification when they get to venue, again, protecting all the integrity side of that data. We have custom-built software that we've created that collects the relevant data points, because not all data points are relevant to all sectors. They may be market suspensions and dangerous attacks and how the ball moves throughout the pitch, which you'd never see as a consumer on a broadcast feed, but you'd expect that from a betting feed. So there's the hardware component, the software component, and we've worked with all the leagues as well to get the connectivity infrastructure in place. So as part of our deal, they will have to provide dedicated connectivity to, again, ensure this reliability back to us and the latency as well. So it's a huge operational one for us, but also a partnership approach with the leagues who are involved with it, want to be involved with it, and believe in our kind of distribution and our messaging around official data as well.
Interesting. And obviously one of the big things why European League was created was to actually protect the interest of the individual leagues that couldn't strike such deals if they weren't, brought together. Is it something where those markets would not have been interesting for you guys if it hadn't been centralized by European leagues, and because of the volume now it does make sense, or are those territories that you're going after regardless?
They are relevant leagues, and ones that we already partnered with a number of them from a video streaming perspective anyway. So they were partners of ours. One that we would always be interested in those leagues. But the aggregation of those rights and the volume makes it a much more appealing proposition to us, and hence why they pulled their rights together, because they believe in that value as well. So we would imagine they're starting to think about other opportunities around aggregation of these rights or similar rights and other opportunities because of the impact that we've had with them. So for sure, the volume is a key driver.
Yeah, terrific. And so that's very straightforward betting first type of solution. The other very big contract that you guys signed is with the MLS, and where I quote, "You will deliver official data, innovative content solutions, next generation fan analytics, and marketing tools to the MLS." Tell us more about it. What is behind all those words? Which of the services that we started discussing are included in there? Which ones are not? Tell us a bit more about this very significant deal, because everybody knows about the big contract that the MLS signed with Apple. Obviously, the potential of the MLS on the American continent is huge. So I'm assuming that this is a very strategic one for you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the MLS, while potentially is still growing, it already established itself now. It's the fourth biggest league. It's outgrown the others there in the US, but potentially still has a lot to grow, especially with the World Cup coming in a few years' time. We expect soccer to keep developing within North America. How did we get to where we are today? MLS has been a partner of ours since 2015. We've been working really closely with them from a video streaming perspective into the sports betting sector, as well as wider IMG media relationships. So they've already been a partner of ours. We've had long-term discussions around how do we evolve and expand and extend our partnership with them. And these kind of conversations have long been going on, where we got to a point where it's what were the MLS's issues? What were their desires? Where did they want to get to? And where did we think we could add value? So as part of that, we've gone through the process on not just fast path data collection, as we talked about with the European leagues, but also working with them on event data collection and player and ball tracking data collection. So how do we bring these three different data sets together to, again, create these really compelling products like we have done in golf, like we have done in MMA, like we have done in tennis? So bringing more innovative solutions to the fan by adding in different data sets. So that was one of the key components, which is all around the services that we can provide and the content creation, but then also adding in our unique USPs in terms of event centers and innovative solutions on that side, which are really driving fan engagement. Then the other component is how do we grow their audience, working very closely with them, and then also monetize that audience. So that's another part of our solution, using the data that we've created. How can we use that to drive audience growth, drive actions in the sports betting sector or in broadcast, and then also how do you convert fans into being more active fans rather than passive fans for the MLS? So it's a really wide ranging partnership we have with them. One that we really believe in the MLS and the growth of the MLS, and ones that kind of suit our skill set, but we'll also expand into other partnerships with other federations as well.
So I think those two examples very well cover the two of the three pillars that we discussed coming in this conversation: betting, media. What about Sports Pro? So you mentioned that Sports Pro was a key pillar for IMG Arena as well. What are you guys doing in that space that is a marquee type of collaboration? And how do you go about that particular market?
So I think our best example is in the tennis space, where we work very closely with the different data sets, but it's still quite early days in how we approach the sports pro sector. But in the world of tennis, we're providing richer data through the different ways of different methodologies of collecting data back to the players and the athletes, and how do they improve their game. Same as we're evolving that and repositioning that in football. We'll work closely with the MLS and what do they want to get out of it? What do the clubs want to get out of it? What are the teams? What are key data points for them? But that's still to be developed and evolved with the MLS in partnership with them.
Got it. Man, I'm just imagining being in Andrew's shoes and going in front of all those organizations. Where do you start when you actually pitch all those services to those organizations? It must be super complicated and at the same time super exciting. Is the North Star of IMG Arena to really be able to cover 360 needs when it comes to data points, digital services for all those organizations? Is that the ultimate North Star?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think as Mark said earlier, right? If you're looking at, let's split this into, you've got clients which are federations and services, and you've got customers. I mean, each can be each, right? But just for the purpose of this conversation, you've got customers who are bookmakers, media outlets, and or teams, right? I think in one sense that the North Star for us is to be able to succinctly collect and then succinctly deliver the package of solutions, right? So if we are taking what we're selling on today on golf, if we're taking what we're selling both to bookmaker operators and media outlets, right, we are not selling them individual components. So we're not selling them an isolated feed for the data. We're not selling them then an isolated feed for the streaming or an isolated feed for course maps, visualizations. We're packaging that up in a full kind of end-to-end solution for fan engagement, right? So when we're looking at the bookmakers, we've tackled the issue of fan engagement on golf from top to bottom, right? First of all was the data collection. We will talk about how the data collection is done and how we are robust and consistent in collecting that. We will then talk about how we tackle bringing the sport of golf to life. So someone on a bookmaker website or a media website can very easily navigate around what is happening in that sport on a hole-by-hole and a player-by-player basis or a three-ball group basis, right? We do a lot of work on talking with customers, on talking with sort of like industry experts on what's the best way to approach this. And then if we're looking at the bookmaking sector, right, it's okay, well, how do you turn this data into odds, right? Because it's an enormous data set. And for each individual bookmaker in this instance to do it themselves, they would have to acquire huge teams, even the top bookmakers in the world, right? This is a huge thing for them to be able to tackle. There's no way they'd be able to go to courses and do flyovers of every single hole and map them on a 2D, 3D, 4D level. They wouldn't be able to put green cams behind each of the greens that collect, that can pick the ball up flying like onto the green and pick up their location within sort of half a ball width. So a lot of this kind of goes on in the background, right? And our ultimate focus in everything that we do is say, okay, what's the North Star with this product, right? What's a kind of base level product that we've got to get out, and arguably our base level product is always more advanced than what's available right now. But then it's saying, okay, we sort of have to rein our product teams back in sometimes. Say, look, hold on, like let's go with this as base, and then we've still got a hell of a lot more that we can do going forward. I mean, even if you're looking on golf, the data and the information that we're collecting allows us to grid up a green and even get to a stage where you could create an interactive green map on where the ball might land. So whether that's for free to play, for media organizations, for bookmakers, or actually even then going back to players, right, and providing them very, very detailed information on location to distance to hole, location to proximity, to the hole. So, like if I take that all back, it's about us doing the work, the legwork behind, and packaging that in a full solution for a customer, so that the solution is there in their hands. There's not much else that they need to go out and do apart from just work with us on how we sort of communicate and work with this. And look, PGA Tour, DP World Tour, they're probably perfect examples of how we've got an incredibly engaged client on the rights holder side who has actually become fully embedded and engaged in pushing a product that an agency has created, or a technology partner, which is what we are ultimately becoming now. and actually pushing that to their customers. They're doing a phenomenal amount of work with betting operators in the US, right, and making sure that they're on board and they're fully engaged with us, rather than just the old transactional model where they hand the rights over and it's all down to the product, right? In our eyes, this is PGA Tour's product as much as it is our product.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just from a pure tech stack perspective, also to move forward with this growth and obviously the acceleration and building a new tech stack partially from scratch on certain topics, and then with a still relatively young existence, even when we look at 8 years ago, how strategic is it for IMG Arena to ensure its growth through acquisition? If we take the examples of Flightscope and Signality, for example, for the capture on site, that are two very that were relatively young yet very promising startups individually. How strategic is it for IMG Arena to actually take the best tech startups in that space around them to accelerate the growth?
Yeah, it was hugely strategic for us. It was a key component of our growth strategy of how do we provide more to our federation clients, to our partners. How do we work better for them in producing the best data and content to the market? So, using Flightscope first, we worked with them since 2012. We've been on that journey with them on in the tennis space, worked very closely with them from a data collection and live streaming production perspective. As we evolved into golf, we partnered with them and co-developed the live scoring solution alongside them. We recognized their operational excellence and worked with them and saw them as the leader in this space, which made it a really natural fit ultimately for us to acquire them back in 2020. So for us to then expand and invest in Flightscope to really build out into other sports, and we've already touched upon what we're doing in football, but it's also in place with basketball, with volleyball, and other sports, where we can provide a whole host of services to our clients, not just fast-path data collection, but on-site services as well. So for us, it was hugely important to bring them in-house and really expand on our services back to the client, back to the federation. And then when we look to Signality, for example, who most recently joined the IMG Arena family, one we've been monitoring for a long time and realized that they were the kind of leaders in the computer vision space in how they collect data from video footage. We identified them as that's our next big growth area, and how do we add in that player and ball tracking, which is becoming synonymous with sports broadcast coverage, with the new betting markets, with all the data that needs to be provided back to the sports pro sector. So for us to kind of provide as many components of that data collection, content creation, it is hugely fundamental to our strategy, and hence why we identified two real leaders in this space to join us. Yeah,
and to get back to those big deals that you guys are tackling and the investments that you are doing to be able to be the best in that very ferocious and competitive landscape, I would say. So I'm assuming you guys work very closely together because there's a fine balance between what you guys are selling, what you guys are paying for in terms of rights. Is that fair to say that you guys work very closely together? And how do you find the right balance between value in kind services, making sure that you also, generate the right amount of cash on a monthly basis, and all those topics? How do you actually go about those different topics, working collaboratively?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, I was just going to say, we talked about this earlier. They're complex deals. They're heavily complex partnerships that we enter into, and luckily enough, Andy and I have worked together for 8 years very closely, and we've seen how our business has grown together, so really understand it. So yes, we work hand in hand in all of the commercial aspects of our business. As it's critical. We're disciplined in that process, and we don't overpromise or underdeliver. So, hugely important for us.
Yeah, I mean, look, Mark's last point, I think, like one of the key things is coming from that startup mentality. At some point, you do have to have some level of governance, and you have to have some sort of level of internal process, and make sure that everyone within the business is on the same track, right? So for us, it's making sure that everyone internally has and we've worked incredibly hard on this over the last sort of 3 or 4 years. I describe perhaps the first 3 or 4 years of my time at IMG, and hopefully Mark probably agrees, is you just get stuck in and you just do stuff, and everyone got stuck in and everyone just did stuff, right? And we made things happen. Now we get to the stage where we've got competing technology priorities and ensuring that we're hitting milestones for customers. So a lot of it's been around internal governance and making sure that everyone's opinions are heard and everyone knows the sort of key clear benefits of doing one project for a client and what that might develop for future clients. And making sure that we're very sort of disciplined on the way that we're working, and you know what, it's nice because it's giving clear direction, right? It's giving people room to grow, innovate, and build stuff where we know it's going to be beneficial for future deals, for future capabilities. But at the same time, everyone's got a nice clear direction, right? Everyone knows the path and the road that they're traveling on. And this is actually, I think this has been one of the biggest hurdles, right? Because you go from a point where everyone's kind of just tucking away and getting on with what they're doing, to now a point where there's just that gentle hand of guidance and vision and direction, just to keep everyone on the same path, but still allowing enough room for that innovation.
Yeah. And actually, that was going to be one of my last questions for you guys, because we've talked a lot about those very tier one clients, marquee deals where it does make sense to invest in, heavy technology and, big strategic, big competition. But another example that was very interesting preparing this podcast was the Kidderminster Harris example that you guys managed to accompany, create a lot of value alongside, and at a very different range, we're not talking about the same type of organization. So how do you manage to cover your tier one clients with their needs and the very advanced tech stack that you need for those organizations, meanwhile still delivering those smaller organizations where you actually also create a lot of value through your know-how? How do you cover that wide range of capabilities? And can you give us a bit more context on that whole Kidderminster Harris example?
So just, talking about the range of clients that we work with, we find the best approach for each one of those. And again, as we talked about right at the start, we always work in a partnership approach. What's the best technology we can provide for them? What's the best way to monetize their rights? What's the best way to provide services to them? And for us, it's about giving them the best share of voice that we can provide. So it's promoting our clients, be that against our competitors, but it's about elevating the work that we do with them and putting them as high as we possibly can. So that's how we take our approach to all of our partners, all of our clients. Is a very partnership approach rather than a one shop fits all proposition.
I mean, look, just in this example that you referenced here, right? I mean, it's this openly, it might not necessarily be down to the work we've done directly with the client here, but it speaks to a lot of the items that we speak with both our clients and customers about, which is we will work with them to make sure that A, their product is visible, and B, that we can actually guide them with any of the advice that we've had. Like a big part of, I think, how we've grown out our portfolio, whether that be on the streaming or the data side, is looking at timings and visibility, right? One of the big projects that we had on over COVID was UTR. UTR is a tennis series that we've really backed and looked into, not only because we feel there's an enormous amount of value in there, but we also feel that the way it's set up and the ranking system that's in place there is it is a disruptor to a certain extent. But through that project and the work we did with them, we said, look, if this is going to be successful, you need to capture eyeballs. And the way we're going to capture eyeballs in this instance is by making sure that there's no conflicting or competing schedules with those big events, which our aim in this instance is not to draw their eyes away from it. It's just to make sure that you have eyes on yours and you are that become that kind of supplementary content. So it's all of these individual items and these points that we raise in all of our conversations. And that flows through obviously to the work we've done with UTR, but also then when we're selling this product and we're selling this content, right? We're going through from on the other side and we're going through to bookmakers saying, look how this is scheduled, right? They're scheduling them and making sure that they're non-competing events with items like with key ATP tournaments, with Grand Slams, or they're on the opposite side of the globe, so that ATP might be finishing and the next content that an individual can roll into is UTR, right? So that we're working on that kind of like transition from customers in from premium tier, but then also providing kind of the well acknowledged it's not the top tier of tennis, right? And it's never going to be. It's a feeder or a seeder or a very competitive lower tier tennis tournament. But what we're delivering for them and how we're guiding them through that process is super important.
Interesting. And in general, maybe one last question: how do you strike the right balance between the license that you can expect in the short term that creates short term MRR, ARR that is relevant, and the potential upside that you analyze in terms of the different collaborations, right? Is it a very standard type of collaboration where with the big organizations it's mainly licensed, and with those smaller tier organizations that we started discussing, it's lower costs but more upside? Or is it not something that you guys are meeting in your that we couldn't standardize in your global relationships with the different organizations you work with?
It's a complete variety. We again, not to labor the point too much, but it's a unique approach we take to every one of our clients that we see the best way of working with them, and we believe in the long-term sustainable growth of these clients rather than how do we do something short-term just to create margin. That's not our approach to the marketplace at all. So it's a whole host of different ways in working. There's not just this is how we structure a deal and therefore we work with you or we don't. There's a real partnership approach.
Yeah. So you are that 500 people organization with still that startup mentality and agility according to the various needs. Sorry, I interrupted you, Mark. Andrew, you wanted to say something?
No, I was going to say, look, I think it's taken a lot of resilience as well, right? And it's taken a lot of commercial resilience and discipline in order to not necessarily get dragged into short-term pieces. That one of the biggest challenges we faced was when PASPA got repealed, right? And the right segment for US content went absolutely nuts. Now we could have sort of doubled down and really gone hard on some of the enormous properties. But I think at the core of it, we're like, hey, what will this deliver for us long term? How can we change? How can we change what this sport, league, federation can deliver to its customers? We get questioned all the time, like, oh, why didn't you sort of go really hard on this one? And the answer is like that there is obvious value in it, but for us long term, we also want to make sure that we've developed the best possible products, technology solutions that can not only enhance over the lifetime of this deal, but are going to enhance other federations, other clients, other sort of opportunities that we're exploring. And look, it's tough. It's tough as well when you're within the ether of IMG and Endeavour as well, who let's be honest, are in conversations with every possible ether of the entire entertainment industry, right? Because everyone has an opinion on perhaps where we should be going, being the sort of the house of data and technology as we're sort of kind of forming into within IMG. So it's a lot of commercial discipline and resilience, I'd say.
Yeah, once again, there's not that one right way of striking the right balance between product and sales opportunities. But I guess, there's a lot of evaluation that comes in when you become a 500 people organization and have to deliver a lot of clients throughout the world. Great. Look, it was great exchanging with you guys. One question we always like to ask our guests on this podcast at the end of it is, if there was one book, one movie, one series, one show that you would like to recommend, what would it be?
I'll start. And the book I read recently that really opened my eyes to some leadership theories was Phil Jackson's 11 Rings book. I think we all watched The Last Dance during lockdown. It seemed like every sports fan and non-sports fan watched it. And I became obsessed with how he coached and led his team. But his book on leadership and his approach to it was really interesting and a fascinating read.
One little story for me about Phil Jackson is that he was always like the perfect example of how to manage, etc. And between The Last Dance and a show I recently saw, it's called L'Envers du Sport in English. It's on Netflix about an NBA referee that was cheating and giving information about the outcome of matches to different people. I wasn't sure he was the type of mentor and coach that I thought he was in my young Chicago Bulls fans' eyes when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But good. I'll definitely take a look at that book.
Yeah, it's great.
Cool. And you, Andrew?
I'm going to say I love Shoe Dog by Phil Knight. Like I thought that was, I really, really enjoyed reading that. And the reason I enjoyed reading that is because you understand the ups and downs that they went through with hiring more people, with him sort of perhaps identifying where actually his strengths and benefits and weaknesses kind of were in his kind of career, his management. And you know what, like the rights industry is similar, right? It's quite hard when I actually explain to my friends like what it is or what we do or how we go through things. It's like, so you don't have a confirmed sort of underlying product, like everything you have to sort of then go out and buy a set of rights to actually fit into that. And we get that peak and trough all the time. And when I was reading his book, I was like, well, look, there's actually comparatives here, but you just don't hear about it, right? Because you see the rise of the brand, you see the rise of what's happened in that organization, and you think, oh, it's just straightforward, right? They've just driven it. So it was identified with it a lot. And if I'm going to add one more in there, I'd say Entourage. You've got to watch Entourage if you're a fan of. That's the way I used to sort of explain or sell the company, right? I used to go in there from day one and say, have you seen Entourage? If they said yes, I'd have an immediate conversation. If they said no, and I'd sort of have to awkwardly explain what Entourage was about and link it to the story to us.
I'm a big Entourage fan. I'd never expected anybody to mention that series on this podcast, but that whole network element is definitely something that is very relevant. Mark, Andrew, thanks a lot for taking an hour to discuss with us, help us understand a little bit what IMG Arena is about and where to expect to see more of you guys in the upcoming years. Thanks a lot for your time. Much appreciated.
Thanks so much. Great chat.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. We hope you enjoy it as much as we love creating them. If you like the episode, feel free to comment, rate, and share with people around you. You can visit our website, www.lastsource.io, to learn more about our activities. You will discover a wide range of articles and can subscribe to our newsletter to receive the latest tech and sports news in your mailbox every month. Stay tuned for new episodes.
Le Corner.